So we have our egg. I'm just going to grab a bowl with a strainer. This one's a little bit big, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to strain it into the strainer and then put it in this little bowl, which is, you can do it that way, or if you have a really small strainer, you can just take that strained egg and just drop it right in your poaching water, or right into your frying pan if you want. Sometimes that's easier, sometimes this is easier. You know, just trial and error, see what you like, what works for you. So literally all we're going to do is take this egg, put it in our strainer here, let it sit for just a minute. And this one has a pretty firm kind of center white, so this might actually take a second. Yeah, this one's not super wet. Actually, I think most of that liquid, since there's not a lot of it, most of it's actually being caught in the mesh, believe it or not. So we'll let that kind of just... just kind of roll it out, and there we go. We've got our egg that has some of that loose white removed, and it did actually, looks like it just stuck right into the mesh. You can let it sit there for a little while. Obviously I don't want to take too long on the video, but what you don't want to do is let it sit there for too long, because it'll start to actually set into the mesh, and then when you try to get it out, it won't really release very well. So if you want to use a little bowl, I think that's great. Otherwise, just make sure you crack it relatively soon before you're about to cook it. But yeah, there you go. All right, so we're ready to poach our eggs. We have our work space set up. Call this mise en place, which means we've got everything in its place. We've got all of everything that we need to cook our eggs all set, because you don't want to be rushing around grabbing stuff. When we're cooking the eggs, that's going to be the last thing you make. You want them to be perfect and fresh and hot and ready to go. So you want to have all of your other stuff done, all of your sauces or your waffles, and you can put those in the oven and have them warm, and then the eggs are going to be the last thing that you do. So I have a half sheet tray here that I set up. It's got salt for our water, it's got some crunchy salt for topping the eggs, and also some a little bit of fresh ground pepper. I have a strained egg, put it in a little cup so that I can actually drop it into the water. It helps us to kind of get that shape that we want to get, control the the little threads that kind of tend to snake off of it while we're cooking. So first thing we're going to do is just kind of open our water here. We got it at almost a boil. We want to have it at a simmer, which is about like 205 degrees is where it kind of starts moving from a simmer to a kind of like a hard simmer. And we want it to kind of stay in that 190 to about 205 range. If it starts to boil, just turn it down. If it's too low, you can throw the lid on it. And then obviously also controlling, you've got a lot of control in your flame too. It's a little harder if you're using an electric stove. I don't love electric stoves, but you can make it work. I just would recommend, if you've got an electric stove, maybe heating up more water so there's more heat actually in the water, because you have a little less fine control with an electric stove. So this right here is going to really help us get some kind of fine control and make sure that water stays at that really nice simmer, which is what a poach is, right? So we don't want it to be too high or too low. We want to keep it right in that nice range. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to take some salt and we're going to add it to the water. All right. And we're not going to add any vinegar. That's something that you see sometimes, that people will add vinegar to their poaching water. That's actually something I learned when I first started poaching. I don't like it though. It doesn't actually make the eggs taste very good. And it also denatures the protein, makes it kind of rubbery. The idea behind it is that it really starts to kind of almost, the acid starts to cook the egg when you put it into the water. So it's a good idea, but I don't really like the result, and it's not really that necessary. just salted water and an egg that's been strained a little bit, and you're going to be in good shape. So we've got about, the water in here is probably about, just a little bit taller than our egg is going to be. You don't want to have too much water, but you also don't want to have too little. What we're going to do is just kind of give it a kind of stir to let it start to kind of get this like cyclone tornado action going here, and that's going to help the bits of the egg just kind of roll on top of each other. We're going to dip this into the water, start to kind of get it set a little bit, and then just let it go, and we're going to control the temperature of the water, just keeping it right off of a simmer. So we're going to drop that a little bit, and again, you're just kind of trying to keep it just right. All right, drop it a little bit more. It looks like we still have some strings. I think that's kind of a notable. Even though we did strain off the thinnest part of the white. You can always just kind of get in there and pull those out too if you want. Okay. So, let that hang and ride for a minute. Getting a little too hot. We're going to drop it a little bit more. The other thing that's nice about having it just right is that just slight simmer action is going to keep the egg from sticking to the bottom. That's one thing you're going to have a problem with if the water is too cold. It's actually going to hit the bottom, and it's going to kind of start to stick a little bit, and then you start breaking your eggs, and then you kind of have a bigger problem. So I'm going to just kind of check it here. I'm going to pull this out, just kind of touch it and see where we're at. I think it just needs another minute. The white is starting to get really nice and set, but the yolk is, we want that to get really nice and custardy. All right, I think we're pretty much there. Get rid of some of those string parts. All right, so actually first take this out, and the reason I have this towel here is that we can use that to absorb some of our liquid. Now, one of the things that you'll notice with poached eggs is they always have this really nice shape to them, but sometimes that's restaurant trickery. You turn them upside down on themselves, start looking a little bit nicer. They're always going to be a little tricky to get them just right. So sometimes you just need to flip them over. So we'll let that sit there for a second and get nice and dry. We don't want to put that straight onto our plate because it's going to start getting everything on the plate wet. So once we got that nice and dried off, we'll just put that in this little bowl so you can see it. Now this one's not even that, it's not perfect, but it's got a good, rough kind of shape there that we want. We don't have a lot of those strings. So let's cut it open and see what our yolk looks like. So it's pretty jammy. You can see that it's got, that perfect consistency we want for our toast. You can cook it a little bit longer, but when you start you can start getting into that range where it starts to get a little bit more like a cooked, kind of hard-boiled egg yolk, which is not as pleasant. So you really want to err on the side of having that white be really, really nice and cooked, but the yolk being really, really nice and jammy and runny. So that's pretty much what we're looking for.